Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett, and I'm joined by Kathy German, the Director of Affiliate Services here at Heartbeat International, along with leaders from 2 Christian adoption agencies. And they'll be discussing the realities of modern adoption, how to honor birth parents, and ways that pregnancy help organizations can share adoption as a loving and empowered choice. These leaders will be talking about some of the things that you can train your staff on to help support clients interested in adoption. And if you're looking for further in-depth training, I'll have a few of our Heartbeat Academy training opportunities linked in the show notes below. And you'll also find information on online resources as well as our upcoming annual conference. So Kathy, I'll go ahead and turn things over to you so that you can bring in today's guests.
Great. Thank you, Christine. So November is National Adoption Month, and it's a time to celebrate the stories of love, courage, and redemption that flow through adoption, and to reflect on how we and the Pregnancy Help movement can share adoption as a loving and empowered choice for the women and families we serve. So today I do have 2 wonderful guests with us. Carol Gledhill is the Executive Director of Covenant Care Adoptions in Macon, Georgia, and Angela Balba is the Executive Director of Choosing Hope Adoptions in Dayton, Ohio. So welcome, Carol and Angela. And I'm so excited to have you guys on today to just have this great conversation about adoption. So, before I came to Heartbeat, I was the executive director of a pregnancy center and an adoption agency in Syracuse, New York. So I also have a little bit of adoption experience, but not to the extent that the 2 of you have. So that's why we're here today, is to hear your stories and for you guys to share about just how we can present this in a really, ethical and modern, relevant way to our pregnancy centers. So let's get started. So thank you guys again, both, for being here. Can you each share a little bit about your own journey and what led you into the adoption ministry? Carol, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you for having me on this podcast today. I'm very excited to be able just to share. I don't have this crazy, I'm an adoptive mom story. So I actually worked in social services when I got out of college, have just always had a heart for families and children, and just making sure that, everybody's being cared for is what I've always just wanted to make sure happened. And so through that, worked in the school system for a while, worked for the university system here in Georgia for a little bit. And then God made it very clear that he was pulling me and calling me towards the ministry of covenant care. So I was introduced to this ministry early on in my life. One of the board members lived across the street from me, and they were what we call interim care. So during that revocation period, they would take care of the babies before they went to their forever home. So as a young child, they got to share with me about what that looks like and what adoption is. And so it was just really neat to see that come full circle, to step into this role as executive director of Covenant Care, and just to watch this ministry love and serve not only the spiritual aspect of these families' lives, but just to love them through and walk alongside them through the journey of adoption. So that's how I got here.
Yeah. Thanks, Carol. I'm grateful to be here as well. And our story's a little different than Carol's. My husband and I have 4 children. Our oldest 2 are biological, and our youngest 2 came to us through private infant adoption. And so our journeys to adoption weren't bad. They were fine. We're grateful, of course, for our children. But I felt in the process that the Lord was kind of nudging and just kind of planting some seeds and ideas of what it would look like to see adoption done as a Christian ministry. And so neither of the agencies we used were Christian, and they were both for profit. And so by the time we brought home our youngest daughter, Lucy, I had dug deep into what it looks like to open an adoption agency alongside a couple other women. And just we'd put our heads together and put pen to paper, and over a couple of years' time, we learned how to open an adoption agency. And so Choosing Hope was founded in 2014. So we brought Lucy home in 2013, and I have had the privilege of directing the agency since then. And we're grateful to come alongside hopeful adoptive parents, Christian hopeful adoptive parents, and expecting moms and dads, and have a team that is all believers, and see the mission of adoption carried out, and especially alongside pregnancy resource clinics, just seeing that as an extension of their mission to see these children be placed into believers' homes.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that you were one of the founders of your agency. So that's amazing. So when you guys think about National Adoption Day or National Adoption Month, in particular, what does it mean personally and professionally? For instance, at the center that I was the executive director of in New York, National Adoption Day, any of the families that we had who had previously placed with us and that were able to finalize on National Adoption Day got to do that at this big ceremony at our convention center. There was a beautiful ceremony where they really honored adoption and foster care. And then afterwards, all the judges were on the outside of the room. And so each family got to finalize their paperwork that day. So I wonder, what does it look like in other areas of the country? Do they do that similarly, or, is it something that's more of like an all month long type celebrations?
Yeah. I do see different counties in Ohio doing that, like gathering groups of families that are finalizing together to all finalize on one day. I think at Choosing Hope, we kind of look at the month as just an opportunity for education, and even checking in with families, and just remembering, why openness is important, why we're doing those things, listening to adoptee voices. Those are the things that we kind of stress as far as National Adoption Month. Personally, for my kids, my oldest adopted son is mentioning it. And so I think at 13, there's more questions coming up, and, why is there an adoption month, that kind of thing. But really, I feel like we are bringing light to those educational points of adoption and highlighting openness, especially as we go into the holiday season. I think it kind of tees things up perfectly for caring for especially the biological family well during the holiday season.
So very similar to Angela in the education portion. So we just really like to focus on sharing stories throughout the adoption month, because I think even when we have placements, or when we're doing things throughout the year with our birth parents and our birth moms and adoptees and our adoptive families, we just really have that push during that month just to make sure that people are remembering that we do celebrate a month, that there are other, ministries out there like us. And we want to make sure that they know that, these families are being served and they're being loved, and it gives them a time to share part of their story. So what I love is that we reach out to families who may have had a placement 10 years ago, and they're able to give an update. Like, here we were 10 years ago, and this is where we are now. And it's just beautiful to be able to see that, because it looks like, oh my gosh, they just got a brand new baby. And that has to be so fun and so beautiful. But to be able to see 10 years later that it's still just as fun and beautiful, as their family has grown, that really is what we focus on. And then obviously just the biblical portion of it, making sure that we're intertwining, God's word, and that he loves us, and he loves us in spite of our failures and for where we fall short. And so just to give the hope of Jesus Christ through this month of adoption.
I love that. I love how you weave the gospel into all of that, and that's part of how you celebrate National Adoption Day. So that's really beautiful. So many people still have outdated ideas about adoption. So how would you describe modern adoption today? Carol, do you want to start out?
Sure. Okay. So modern adoption today, explaining that to people is, gosh, I mean, I've been at Covenant Care almost 7 years now, and how much it's just changed in the short time that I've been here. I mean, Angela's going to have something very different, especially as an adoptive mom and opening this agency, in 2000, 14. Now Covenant Care has been around and has been in the state of Georgia for 36 years. So it is shocking to me to read through files 36 years ago and then to read through files now. So going and doing training or just having conversations at churches, or you're meeting with a donor and they're sharing their experiences. Like last night we were doing a training down in the coastal Georgia area, and an older lady walked up and said, I've got to share with y'all about my sister and she made an adoption plan in the early 70s, and just was explaining. I mean, there's so many of those even here at Covenant Care. Now, we opened in 1989, but to even hear about those, it was very closed. You know, we knew a little bit about the adoptive couple. No pictures, no letters, no visits. I mean, I do have to say there are some times that I read these files and I'm like, okay, Covenant Care was on the up and up, because sometimes these, like, the birth moms would meet the adoptive couple in the hospital, or met them right after placement. And you really didn't hear much about that. So being able to talk to people now and say, hey, look, we do open adoption, and what that looks like is pictures, letters, visits, all the way until the child's 18. We also use the cluster app, so the couple and the birth mom can message back and forth and send pictures. And then you get people who are like, are you not scared that, mom's going to come back and take her baby and she's going to find that couple? And that is, and I know Angela can speak into this too. I mean, that's when we're able to educate and share with them to say, that's why you want to be with agencies like ours, like Covenant Care, because we're a part of this process. Like, we're serving for a lifetime. We're not leaving this birth mom to navigate openness by herself. We're not leaving this adoptive couple or this adoptee to navigate any part of this adoption by themselves. I mean, that is so overwhelming. And yes, we want to make sure that they know what healthy boundaries are, and they understand that our moms are coming to us. We're not coercing them. We're not forcing them to make an adoption plan. And that's just really hard for people to understand sometimes, that, we hear, how in the world could she just give her baby away? We're like, oh my gosh, you don't give anything away. You're not discarding something. Like, when you're actively making a plan, that means that she cares and loves her child enough to do something different. So I know I'm preaching. I don't mean to be preachy, Kathy. So I'll let Angela.
That's really, really good. And I think for pregnancy centers or just other listeners out there, they don't understand necessarily what open adoption is and how it's different from what it was years ago. So the letters, the pictures, the visits, if they want them, I mean, that's so important. And I'm really curious to hear about that app. You'll have to tell me about later.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
But what you just shared was really, really important. And yeah, Angela, I'd love to hear your input on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the same things. I think if I was going to boil down, modern adoption now is relational instead of transactional. And so choosing hope, our kind of tagline is, adoption is more than a moment in time. It's a relationship for life. And I think that goes back to the gospel. Like, what we want to see is adoption done relationally whenever possible. Of course, we have an occasional mom who isn't currently open to openness, but she knows that if she comes back, whether it's weeks, months, or years later, that door is open for a relationship. And I think that's the difference between adoption done decades ago versus adoption now, is that it's relational, and we recognize that there is trauma in it, and that relational piece helps in the healing for the whole triad. So.
Yeah, you guys both said some really important things there, that it's a lifelong relationship too, that you both of your agencies continue to support that birth mom and that birth family for forever, really. So when she needs help, just when she's going through, different cycles of the grieving process and all of that, you're there for her if she reaches out. So I love that. And I also love, what you just said about your tagline being, that it's relational. And that it's not transactional. And I think that really sums up kind of the difference in where we've come from with adoptions. And then you touched on it a little bit, Carol, already, but like, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you see these days? And one of them you mentioned was that, aren't these adoptive couples afraid that the birth mom is gonna, find, her baby and try to, want her baby back or whatever and track down the family. So what other things like that do you hear about adoption and open adoption?
When we're educating our families, we always say, look, you have to turn the Lifetime movies off. Like, it just doesn't, it's not like that. It's not a Lifetime movie. It's, I think, especially with private adoption like we do, we have to remember that these women have made this decision voluntarily. They've not been made to make the decision. And so they're not looking to come back to reverse their decision. I think other misconceptions that we probably hear is that all, and I want to be careful, that all adoptees are frustrated or mad. And we hear beautiful stories from adoptees that are grateful or have worked through the grief and the trauma well and come out well. Of course, it's not like that for everyone, but I think it's important to highlight those stories that are good and feel redemptive, but aren't always as loud in the social media world, especially.
Yeah, I think something, to piggyback on what Angela is talking about is, standing for what we stand for. Okay, first of all, being a nonprofit adoption agency is extremely difficult, and being a small nonprofit adoption agency just serving your state. So I serve Georgia. Angela's over there representing Ohio. Like, we're not all over the place. We only serve the women here in this state. We're not flying people places and doing all this, it just, other big box attorneys and other bigger agencies, they're able to do more than we're able to do. And when it's not done well, it makes us look bad. And I think too, what is extremely difficult is the noise on social media, on TikTok, on these places where they're saying like, how could any woman, make an adoption plan, or, like I just said, using horrible adoption language, giving away their child, putting them up for adoption, all this different kind of stuff. And I think what's hard for us is that we see these women every day, or we're in communication with our birth moms weekly, monthly, daily. And when they're seeing all these things on social media saying, you were done wrong, adoption should never happen, you should make sure they should parent. And it's like, we're sitting there and we're thinking, okay, let me put this out there. Angela and I know for a fact, we talk through parenting. Every single woman that we come in contact with, we talk parenting almost to a fault.
Yes. Like, we're routinely asked to stop. Like, we'll have women say, I need you to stop reminding me that I have that option.
Yeah. Like, what can we do to help you parent? If it's financial, that is not a reason to place your baby for adoption. If it is because you don't have housing, that is not a reason to make an adoption plan. So hear us when we say this. There is so much more that the women that we are working with every day are going through. And on the surface, it may look like, well, just pay for her to live somewhere or do this. And it's like, I want to get on there and be like, you have no idea like what we're going through to help these women to figure it out, to help them keep their family together. And so then when they choose adoption without coercion, without pressure, and they make that choice, we want to make sure that there's agencies like us that are there to do that and do it with dignity and with love and with support, and to know that it's not, okay, well, you placed your baby, so good luck, hope it all works out for you. That the money that goes to these ministries is going right back out to these women, that's going right back out to continue to serve. And I feel like, to me, that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that we're these money hungry people out here, like forcing these women to place their children for adoption. And that is hard to stomach, because that is not what we are.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And you're right, being a nonprofit adoption agency, a small one, because we were too, in New York, the one that I was part of. And you're right, you don't have the resources to do all those extra things. But when you're limited to just serving those families in your particular state, and you need for people to understand and support that birth mom and the choice that she made, because it's not easy. No matter what, adoption is a hard thing, right? There's grief and there's loss on all parts, for the birth mom and for the adoptive family, because maybe the adoptive parents, they could be grieving the fact that they are not able to have their own biological children, or grieving many, many miscarriages along the way, or whatever. So it's a hard process. And I think that that's what's beautiful about private adoption like this, and just that lifelong care, is that you're there for the birth mom, but you're also there for the adoptee and for the adoptive family to be able to offer, help and assistance and resources. So let's kind of change gears a little bit here. So what are some practical ways that pregnancy help organizations can help clients see adoption as a courageous, loving choice? And at what point in the client's decision-making process should adoption be introduced?
I think that pregnancy resource clinics have a harder job talking about adoption than the agencies do, because women, when they come to us, they know they're coming to an adoption agency, and so they're not pulling that subject out of a hat. And I know that pregnancy resource clinics can feel like that sometimes. I still think you can bring up adoption from the get-go, just talking about it as an option as they dream for the life of their baby. I know what they're hearing, what the workers, the volunteers are hearing is, I can't carry my baby for 9 months and then give it away. And so I think reminding pregnancy centers that to really get these women and men, when they're there, to dream about the life of their baby. What does it look like? What does it look like with you parenting? And what does it look like if you make the decision to have someone else parent as their mom and dad because you love them? We encourage the language of that it's a parenting decision. As your mom, as the child's mom, you are choosing what you feel is best for them. But I think having that conversation early, and then just saying, at this point, you're just touching base with that agency. You'll sit down and have a conversation with them in the office, over coffee, maybe text or Zoom, whatever you're most comfortable with. But it's definitely not a commitment at this point. You're just talking. They want to hear your story, just like I want to hear your story. I know so often, I think women feel like if I reach out to that agency, I've made a commitment. And I'm sure Covenant Care is just like us. Like this conversation at 8, 10, 12, 25 weeks is just a conversation. And so if the clinics and centers can remind women that, hey, it's just a conversation. It's not a done deal.
Right. And they have time, right? I mean, they don't have to make a quick decision. They can kind of, think through it and process it. And also, they can change their mind multiple times throughout their pregnancy. We've seen that happen so many times, right?
Yeah. I think that time factor is to say you have time. I hope that gives women the ability to exhale. At most agencies, I'm guessing even when you come to us at 36 weeks, we're thinking we have time. Like that is plenty of time. And so, I mean, we do have women think, oh, I should have come sooner. Nah, you came when it was right for you, and it's always good.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that being said, we always train the pregnancy centers to, you want this woman, you want this client to come in and feel safe. And if she doesn't feel safe, she's going to disengage. So a lot of times what we talk about is helping our centers understand that you want to help her feel in control. You don't ever want to talk over her, but knowing that you're given the options. And so we like to phrase it and help them understand to say like, hey, I'm really glad you're here today. Tell me what these are your three options. You have abortion, adoption, parenting. Like a lot of times everybody leaves adoption as the last. So change it up. Say your three choices are adoption, abortion, parenting. Which one would you like to talk about first? So when you phrase that question, it's not, what do you want to talk about today? So you're letting her be in control to say, I would like to talk about parenting. Well, she wants to talk about parenting first. You've let her know that you're also going to talk about the other two options. So I always feel like that is super important, but also letting, it's funny that I love that we're getting to talk about this because I just came back from doing 2 trainings yesterday, and I was really just pushing on them and helping them understand that I know at Covenant Care, a majority of the women that we work with that reach out to Covenant Care do it within the last month of their pregnancy or when they're sitting in the hospital. So I tell pregnancy centers all the time, you speak adoption throughout her pregnancy. You listen to her. And if you hear her when she comes in to do Earn While You Learn or her Bright course, or she's going to do some shopping for the baby, and she may say to one of your volunteers, I just really don't think I can do this, or I'm really struggling, or whatever. You've got to listen to her. This is all about relationship building, because that's your chance to say like, hey, tell me about what you're struggling with. That may be a time that the Lord is equipping you to step in and have an adoption conversation. Like, I hear you're saying you're struggling. Let's talk through that. I know you weren't really open to the option of adoption when you came in at 12 weeks. Now that you're at 38, let's have that conversation. And I just think a lot of times centers don't feel equipped at first because it's a life or death situation most of the time. So we always want to be very sensitive to that, and for centers not to think that we're pressuring them to do that, but they do have to know about their options.
Yeah, agreed. I think, and what you both just said, you said it so beautifully about you're giving them the choice. Like, you have 3 options, and like you said, giving them a choice. Which one do you want to talk about first? What about, like, what makes for a strong and ethical partnership between pregnancy centers and adoption agencies? And then at the same time, then how do you find agencies that share your mission and values?
So I live, I guess, in my own bubble over here in Georgia, and wished that more pro-life ministries actually banded together and understood that we're all on the same team. I come from the background of, we're family. We're all in this together. We want her to choose life. And if she chooses life, we got to figure out, where does that go from here? So if she comes to a center and says, I want a parent, but I'm also thinking adoption, and she calls Covenant Care and we talk through her options with her, parenting and adoption, she chooses, okay, maybe adoption's not for me. I want to go back to talk about parenting. I'm immediately going to call that pregnancy center, or I'm going to give her all the information that she needs to, if it's housing, if it's food, if it's whatever, job training, all of that kind of stuff, because we want to make sure that she is taken care of, not just the baby in her belly, that she has value. She has value, and so does that baby. And so we've got to figure out, ethically, how are we working together in this? And if you can't trust your pro-life organizations and ministries, who can you trust? We're all fighting for the same thing, and we should be able to reach out to our churches for resources and, for help. We need help. We all need help. To figure out what that looks like. And so then on the flip side of finding an ethical agency in your state, make the call. You have got to personally call your agencies in your state or wherever. Get on your DHS site, the government site, to say who all is licensed in your state as a child placing agency. Call those places. Ask them what they do. Ask them their mission and vision. Ask them how they serve the adoption triad. Ask them for their statement of faith. I could keep going on and on. Angela's over there like, yes, girl, I hear you. You've got to, even say, do you have an adoptive family that we could reach out to that could vouch for covenant care? Or do you have a birth mom that would be willing to speak on behalf of how you serve them? Yes. Do your research. Find out who you're working with for sure. So
I don't think that I would say much different. I think it's important for adoption agencies. I feel like I'm beating the same drum, to have relationships with centers, like for them to be able to pick up the phone and say, even maybe they've even stepped out of the room with mom and to say, hey, I have a question. Mom's here. She is asking, a question they haven't come across. Mom's an immigrant. Can she make an adoption plan? And just to have that kind of camaraderie where they know they can pick up the phone, ask a hard question, and hop right back over to mom. Those are the centers that we have the best relationships with, that they know our names, and our faces. And it's a relationship. Carol mentioned, touched on asking for that statement of faith. I can't emphasize enough how important it is that centers work exclusively with Christian adoption agencies. I feel strongly that when you don't, your mission stops the moment you place that baby into a non-Christian home. And if you aren't guaranteeing that that baby's going into a Christian home, then your mission is cut short. And so I just really encourage those hard calls with agencies, interviewing them, asking questions, talking about what their mission statement is, what their statement of faith is. I think it's paramount to the mission.
Yeah, agreed. I think that those are all really good tips that you've got to do your homework, and at Heartbeat too, we can help you. So if there's listeners out there that you're affiliates and you're working for a center and you don't know in your area, in your state, who you can work with, we can help connect you with those Christian adoption agencies. And I think, you keep mentioning the word relationship, and it's so true. So it's building that relationship with the birth mom and the adoptive family, but it's also that relationship between the pregnancy centers and the adoption agency. And that's, exactly from my experience too, like our birth parent advocate would go, just like Carol's doing, in training pregnancy centers. So what training or mindset shifts do you think are most important for pregnancy center staffs when they're presenting adoption?
I think that getting centers to think of adoption as a parenting choice, that making an adoption plan is an extension of her being a mom and a good mom. Because we don't use the terminology good mom with abortion, but we can and should use it with adoption, and kind of and getting a little bit away from adoption being the opposite of abortion, but adoption being just a beautiful parenting option. I think that's important, and I think again it empowers mom and dad when he's there, of course. But it's empowering for them to. I love my child this much that I'm making this choice as a good mom, and get outside of the feelings of shame, but knowing that there's grief there, but that it is good as we work towards a story of redemption and redeeming what feels lost.
Yeah. I think also just remembering too that we all have trauma. That's been our focus this year as we've gone in to do trainings with our centers is talking about making an informed decision with trauma. That's really hard. Yeah, I mean, we've all got trauma. We're all sitting here. We've had traumatic experiences, whether it's a big T or little T trauma. It could be a single incident, or it could be, multiple things that we've dealt with over our life. And helping her make a decision through that is so difficult. And so having that training to know what to look for to help her to de-escalate when she comes into that center, because if she walks in and pregnancy centers hear my heart in this and understand where I'm coming from, but if you're counseling with the only option she has is parenting, then where's her choice? Like if you're only giving her one option, if you're making sure she doesn't abort, but you're only telling her parenting, you're not giving her any other choice. And forcing her to parent may not be what she wants to do, or thinking in her mind, she may be thinking, I'm going to break the cycle. The cycle that I grew up in is not the cycle that I want my child to grow up in. And I see something very different for my child, and helping her be able to see what that looks like. And it's what Angela said, help them write that story, help them figure out, what my other options are and what this could look like for my child.
So can either of you think of a story, particular adoption placement maybe at your center that was just, really illustrates that choosing love in action and was just particularly meaningful to you?
Angela, do you want to go? I feel like she's chomping at the bit. I want to.
No, I don't know. I mean, we have so many, but I think as these kids get older, we can see that beauty a little more. I think of a mom that we served twice, and she placed two kids with the same family. Just to boil it down, I mean, she was just really unwell. But gosh, we loved her. We loved her. And the adoptive family loved her. And it was an honor to serve her in two separate adoptions as she battled the things that she battled in life. And then shortly after the second baby, she was diagnosed with cancer, and even though pictures had been exchanged and letters and gifts back and forth, mom wasn't ready to meet the family. But when she knew she was dying, she asked for that opportunity, and they were able to meet, and share just the love of the Lord, and get pictures together, that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And it will be sweet one day, bittersweet for those adoptees, but just a treasured moment for the adoptive parents, those kids, for our staff, and for mom's extended family who all got to see that come full circle.
So we had or have an adoptee that reached out to us. He was actually placed through Covenant Care 30 years ago, and he was ready to figure out if he could connect with his birth family. And so Covenant Care got to be a part of that while I was here. So obviously I was not here for his placement 30 years ago, but was definitely here when he started to have questions and just wondered. Because I can't imagine as an adoptee of 30 years, we hear this from adoptees. You wonder, there's always a question mark if you don't have pictures or you've never had contact. Like, who do I look like? Do I have any siblings? Do I, all of those questions. And so for us to be able to be a part of that and to navigate him being able to have contact and actually meet his birth father, was absolutely just only God. It's only something God could orchestrate. And to see, after that visit, to hear him be like, those question marks are gone. Like, to be able to see a picture and actually meet face to face with his dad and get to hear his dad's story, to find out that he has a sibling, but to also have some contact with, his birth mom, and to be able to, just share in that and know that. I think what was interesting for us is because his story is not all beautiful. There's definitely messy in that story. And for us to be here 36 years later and to help him navigate that just was really, it really spoke to my heart. And to how important that was, that he was raised in a 2-parent Christian home, and that his mom and dad, his adoptive mom and dad, supported him through that and loved him through that. And then to go through and meeting his birth family. So
I love that. That is just really beautiful. It gives me chills. And I love those stories. So as we wrap up today, if you could leave our listeners with one takeaway this National Adoption Month, what would it be?
I think that the takeaway with adoption is that the redemptive stories and the waiting for adoptive families to get the baby, even the waiting for that child to grow up, like the story that Carol just shared, that hold on and wait. Trauma is part of it all, but that redemptive story is coming.
I think the last thing that I want to leave with everybody about adoption, and just for the adoption month, is that remember that we're not finding a baby for a family, that we're finding a family for a baby. I know it's kind of like, well, when you say it out loud, you're like, what? What does that, what does that mean? But to truly understand the ministry of adoption, that if you're going into this for your vetted agency to find you a baby, you're doing it for the wrong reason, because you need to step into this knowing that you're stepping into this as an adoptive couple to not only love this child for a lifetime, but to love this birth mom and this birth father and the birth family, because it could come with a whole slew of people, grandparents and aunts and uncles. And we're not emphasizing a blended family, but what we're emphasizing is the gospel, that it's kingdom building, that you're stepping in and saying, I'm committed to raising this child in a 2-parent Christian home. And our prayer always on placement is that this child comes to know the Lord at an early age, and that we can't wait as a ministry to see what God's going to do in this child's life and in this birth parent's life, and in this adoptive couple. So that's what I would want to leave everybody for this month.
So this conversation has been such a gift. I want to thank both of our guests here today, Carol and Angela, just for sharing their wisdom, their hearts, their passion, and their deep commitment to seeing adoption done with integrity, compassion, and grace. So as we celebrate National Adoption Month, let's remember that adoption is more than a legal process. It's a reflection of God's redeeming love written into the lives of birth parents, adoptive families, and the precious children they share. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day.
It's been great to have you on with us as we celebrate National Adoption Month. I hope our listeners will also check out the show notes for more resources on adoption, things that you can use throughout the year to continue training your staff. With that, we wish you all a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.